Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast.
Today's episode, Flying the Flag for Effective Communication with Jez Kay. We talk about how his first job could have been the inspiration for the TV series The Office, his first pirate dance in wearing weird suits to the city, and going viral on TikTok.
Where is Jez at? During the day, he's a communication coach and helps business leaders to put their message across. He's the founder of My True Talent, a portal for talented working individuals who want to improve their communication skills. Jez wrote Peter True, The Early Years, the story of what happens to a young boy who's sent to a girls' school. He has a modest fan base on TikTok, where his daughter Theo teaches him to dance. But he's a dad, so he can't dance. Jez has also produced a local TV show, The Chair, interviews with inspiring people.
So good afternoon to you, Jez. How are you today?
I'm very good indeed, thank you very much. Thank you for having me on the show.
A pleasure.
Absolutely.
Shall we get started with our first question? So when you were little, did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, it depends how old I was when I was little. But when I was very little, I think I must have wanted to be a rock star, because most people wanted to be a rock star, or someone on the telly, because I really, really loved the telly. I was obsessed with it. We had a really, really knackered living room, which, of course, because I lived in a very nice and quite big middle-class house, it was our room, as in the children's room. So the other two weren't there, which is great. So I was there in the knackered old settee, which I'd eaten half of. and we had a black and white TV, as was the case in them days. And that black and white TV had a brilliant little dial on it. It wasn't push button or anything, it had a dial. And our TV was rented. So, because quite a lot of TVs were rented in those days. And it's a fact I only realised relatively recently. Anyway, and it was rented from a company called Telefusion, not Rediffusion, Telefusion. And Telefusion enabled me to find as many TV stations as I possibly could. And we lived in Bath in Somerset. And I was able to get possibly the greatest TV channel ever in the history of TV, which was ATV. And famous for the ATVI, its ident, which you can find on Google Kids anytime you feel like. It's a beautiful thing. Anyway, and they used to have these groovy sort of semi-American, or what you might call international spy sort of TV series, like Randall and Hopkirk Deceased, which was marvellous, and The Protectors, which was even better, and The Persuaders and all that sort of, and they were usually the somethings. And absolutely fantastic. And I kind of found this station. It was a bit grainy because it was actually coming from a transmitter a very long way away. But I didn't care. I absolutely loved it. And I adored TV so much that I thought, I'm going to be on TV one day, or maybe many days. The closest I got to it while we were in Bath was on It's a Knockout in the crowd. And I managed to spot myself about 100 miles away. But there was great rejoicing in our household when I spotted myself. But that was as close as it got in those days. And then when I was a bit older, I watched, again, it was all TV related, I watched The Extraordinary Rumpole of the Bailey. And my mother and I conspired at that, as soon as we saw, I think, the first one, we both said, I am going to be a High Court judge. But before I become a High Court judge, I'm going to be Rumpole. I'm going to be Rumpole, and just, whatever that means. Apparently it meant becoming a barrister. Mm-hmm. So that was pre-rebellious child, which I sort of pretended to be a rebellious child. I wasn't really a rebellious child, but I kind of sort of, pretended a bit when I was about 15, because we moved house and we moved to the Cotswolds, where everybody is officially crazy because there's nothing to do. And particularly kids, because, I mean, nothing at all.
to do.
Nothing. So occasional, barely illicit substances. But it was all very exciting, particularly when you got to about 16 or 17. But I was rebelling, but rebelling probably more than I thought, because when I eventually did do law, which you have to do in order to become a barrister, I started to get slight doubts, because it was quite boring studying law on the whole. The best bit about law was admin law, which sounds incredibly boring, but the irony was that it was the most interesting subject law could provide me with, apart from little snippets of jurisprudence. But that was a weird philosophy of law, but that was a bit like just sort of reading a kind of cartoon comic or something like that. There was nothing particularly serious about jurisprudence. But admin law was quite serious, but I couldn't really imagine myself ever working for local government. So I kind of thought, well, this is a bit useless, really. But because I was still slightly mad, I did go to bar school, which wasn't the best idea. And I got put off once and for all the whole of law as a profession by the people who were on my course. With one notable exception, who became my wife.
You'll do. The rest of you can all bugger off.
You can all bugger off. It was quite, and we both sort of went through the same sort of thing, except officially, she's my wife, who's called Hella. She qualified, but never went on to do her pupillage. I didn't, because I was just rubbish. I was just absolutely rubbish at sort of, I don't know, just taking part, I think, probably. I just could not take part. I sort of went through the motions for about 6 months, and then I just realised that this was, where am I and what am I doing here? So that was kind of the ambition sort of knocked on the head. But I think in retrospect, I really should have stuck with my first choice. And I think my first choice was wanting to be on telly. I think I did want to be a rock star, but that was only because I had a kind of, well, not even mild obsession, fairly serious obsession with the Beatles when I was 8 or 9 years old, like a lot of children of that era and that age. I wanted to be on TV, and I should have stuck with that really. My first choice. But I didn't, because I thought I need a vocation. No one really gets to be on TV. Only fake people get to be on TV who read from what is known as autocue. And they're all fake, or they act or something. You know, I had no real idea, and I just thought, no, actually that can't be real. So I think I might as well do a vocation, which was just, I remember thinking the word vocation, which was ridiculous really, because I was only 17. I mean, vocation, what a silly word to think of. But anyway, so there you go. That's sort of what I wanted to be. And the rest, as they say, is whatever it was.
Cool. So after you went to lawyer school to find your wife,
yes.
What came next? You're like,
It accomplished. Yay. So that was Pursuit of Love done. I could check that one off. But that's another story. But yeah, so I thought, well, I better do something with my life, really. So having had officially the worst jobs in the world, I can now state, because I don't think it exists anymore, so I'm not going to get sued by anyone. And anyway, the chance of it fairly minor anyway. But so I worked at a place called Rail Freight Distribution for precisely 1.5 months. And that is officially the worst job I've ever had, or anyone has ever had, actually. And it was the if you like, the prototype for the office. It's absolutely perfect. I'm sure Ricky Gervais worked there at some point. He must have done, because it was absolutely the same. Even down to an honest to goodness Gareth, who was called Callum. It's extraordinary. He looked like him as well. He was actually, they were exactly the same person. The person who was, there were two people who were a little bit like the Ricky Gervais character, but it was abominable. It was absolutely abominable. And everybody sat there with kind of, because it was the bought ledger department or something like that. So really the dullest place in the world, run by the most, well, just misconceived people. I mean, just wrong. And Callum, who sat next to me and told me not to sniff. Extraordinary. And so from there, I thought I'd better sort myself out quick, or I might
get actual vocation. Yes,
I need to work it out what it is I need to do. And for some strange reason, I think inspired by my beautiful father, who had been a electronics engineer, but I knew I couldn't be an electronics engineer. But I was aware of the fact, and my friend Steve, because everybody has a beautiful friend called Steve.
Yep.
And my friend Steve had successfully managed to get himself a job, which was a miracle, at least according to his dad. But he'd been working at McDonald's and he thought, I better get a job. So he did it a little bit before me. And he got a job as a systems analyst. And I went, Steve, what's one of those? And he told me very, very well, actually, very succinctly, and in a very grown-up manner, which I was very surprised about, because this is a guy I had first met at uni, and he had a flat top, and he rather liked chicken dancing, and that was him. That was kind of it. But then he got himself a job as a systems analyst, and I thought, this is like a proper person now. So I might be, there is hope for me. So I thought, well, actually, do you know what? I think this thing called IT, which is what it was known then, I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll give that a go. So I was in the University of London, I don't know, library or something. I don't know, it was library. Oh, yeah, no, the careers office, because I was being quite almost resourceful. Mm-hmm. And I went in there and I found their little job mag. And I looked through it and I thought, no. Oh, God, no. And I'd had a few fairly dreadful job interviews just before that. No, that's not going to work, that one. And then right at the back was it was like a shiny little star of a job ad. It was really very lovely. It was beautifully written. And it said something like, we are about to relocate from Brixton to Golden Square in Soho. And we are looking for a systems analyst. Oh, yes, I know what one of those is. So I went along for the interview, and it was officially the worst interview I've ever had and I ever will have. But because it was the worst interview, of course, I don't know anything about anything, they offered me a job. They were the only ones to offer. In fact, I think they're the only ones ever to have offered me a job. Oh. And they were absolutely flipping brilliant. I mean, they were phenomenal people, which is why I thought I'd done a really, really lousy interview. And they carved me up with glee. You know, I'd written a particularly pretentious CV, and they just totally carved it up. And then it transpired that what they'd been looking for wasn't so much a systems analyst, because they had to put something in that funny little job advert. What they were looking for was someone who could do support, because they were sick and tired of having to, well, frankly, support because they were a software business that was doing very well. And because it was doing very well, they were kind of in demand as support people. And they were programmers and developers, and they hated people, obviously. So, you know, and which was fair enough. I would have hated people if I'd have been there. So they wanted someone like me, and they said, we employed you because you had a high bullshit factor. Who was I to argue? No. And there were aspects of that job that I absolutely adored, because it was people, and I love people. Even though I'm reluctant to say it sometimes, I love people. And I really enjoyed going to see people suffer, actually, and then cure them of their ills by just saying, I'm exactly like you are. I didn't say that, but I intimated it, just largely because I was a bit slightly foolish and kept making mistakes.
I didn't know what I'm doing either.
Which they kind of thought, that's rather nice. We like him because he's not a flipping freak. Mm-hmm. So, because they were used to freaks by that point. I think they quite liked the business, and they liked the people who my lovely boss, Jonathan, and the other people who were working there at the time. They really quite liked them, but they knew that they were weird, and they needed someone perhaps who wasn't quite so weird. even though I wore very weird suits, deliberately, obviously, because I was going to the city. So this links into the whole pirate thing. My very first pirate stand, if you like, was to wear weird suits to the city, because I just thought, I am not wearing one of those. I'm going to
describe weird.
Well, I wore green suits and beige suits, but it was, but by beige, what I mean, it wasn't so much beige, more a kind of camel colour.
Oh, it was like sand coloured.
Sandy suits. Yes,
like you were the man from Del Monte.
Yes, a little bit, but not quite that. Not quite that. I don't know, white. But anyway, it was a little bit browner. But anyway, I wore these funny suits, and people quite liked me, so I loved it, and I loved IT support for this very specific bit of software, and quite enjoyed finding out about what it was like to work in this rather strange world of IT. And then what happened was I discovered the internet, sort of by mistake. Well, no, actually, kind of by mistake, but also because I was bored out of my tiny mind, actually, because this was something like 6 years later. I'd stayed officially 4 years too long at this company, because there was a trend, certainly in those days, for you to switch jobs every 2 years. And for some reason, I hadn't read the memo of life, and or at least of career path. So I was still there after 6 years. And it was just not working for me particularly. But I thought, well, I've got to work this out again, not for the first time. And I had a eureka moment. I think it was almost in the bath. I was being Archimedes or something. And I thought, blimey, because I just got a home computer, because in those days you called them home computers. And so I just bought myself a home computer because I thought I was going to be a rock star. So I sort of thought I'd rewire it so that, or as it were, and install sound cards and sort of set up my own little home studio. But before I could do that, or before I sort of got on with that, I discovered there was this funny little kind of icon thing where I could go and surf the web, or whatever that was. And it said Microsoft Network. So I went, or MSN. So I clicked it, and I ended up playing virtual football with someone in Germany. I thought, wow, this is amazing. I'm never doing this again. But there are certain things about this internet place that I rather loved. So I set about learning about it. And also my final moment of rebellion was when I told my boss in no uncertain terms that he needs to sort himself out and get online. And I proved it to him, which was extraordinary intellectual. It's the only intellectual thing I ever did in that organization. But he loved it. He thought, this is great. Let's be rich. So, they got 10 grand for a quick system that they cobbled up in about half an hour, which is rather nice, just like that, which lasted for 12 years, which when you think about it is rather a good investment for the company that bought it. So as a result of me going, I'm really bored, please help me. And then I thought, no, you better help yourself and show him how to do stuff. So it was, that led me to the next bit, which was setting up a web development company with my mate Henry, which we set about doing. And we were determined to be the most famous, the most brilliant, the most exceptionally wonderful business people ever. And we started quite well, actually. We found ourselves in Adidas HQ within 3 months of setting up shop, and we couldn't stop laughing. It was just extraordinary. And we got there because the agency who we were working with, they were a kind of a large advertising agency called Leas Delaney, whose really only client to speak of was Adidas. This guy called, I think he was called James. Can't remember. Yeah, I think it was called James. Anyway, he ended up getting the box room in the hotel, and we got the plush one. And we were so excited and laughing a lot as a result. And we ended up going to what can only be described as Deutsch school. Adidas is a school, basically. It's like a school. It's like going back to, high school. It's like at some sort of high school. And it was brilliant because they had 6. This is 1998, right? And they had 6 internet consultants in the room of 13 people. Never have a meeting of more than 6 people. We all know that. And do not get 6 internet consultants in. It was insane. And we were still laughing when we got back on the plane. But that was what it was like. It was a crazy time. It was absolutely insane. And we quite enjoyed ourselves for a while. It was quite tough because there were only 2 of us for a little while. And then we got Dave. Obviously, you've got to employ. Your first employee has to be called Dave.
And Henry, yes.
It has to be called Dave. And he was a lovely, lovely man. And we were very lucky. A lovely young man he was. And we were very lucky as employee number 1. And we managed to fill out the spaces over the next couple of years quite well. But then we got nervous because 2000 was officially the year of the dotcom bubble bursting. And we thought, well, if it's bursting, it's going to burst all over us. So we better shut up shop, which is rather unfortunate, really, because we were doing all right. It's just that we didn't know where next month's work was coming from. So we kind of thought, oh, well, if we don't know that, because we'd been running things so precisely and perfectly that we thought, well, this is imperfect. We can't carry on, really. So, which was a shame because actually we were very good and we did a very fine job for people because no one knew how to do web development really in those days. Not the sort of web development we were doing, which was quite hardcore. And it involved databases and things like that, which in those days people were like, know all about that.
Need one of those.
Of course. No one knew about that at all. But we did because we happened to. I didn't. I kind of did. I pretended I did. But Henry was amazing. And then we got Dave 2, because you've got to have 2 Daves. Can't just have one. And Dave number 2 was one of Henry's best friends, and he happened to be a total genius. Completely. I mean, as a developer, he was just extraordinary. And of course, his next job was with Credit Suisse and, that kind of stuff. But I think he's still there, actually. It's unbelievable. A great time, but sort of short-lived. We did very well, though. We kind of, I don't know, I think we turned over something like 350,000 or something in the third year, or something like that. I don't know. A number that means something. So that was cool. So yes, so that's the. Would you like to know the next bit of the story, children?
Yes, please.
Well, then what happened was a bit of wilderness years, actually, because I had to I had to go through the same process again. What am I going to do? And I thought, well, I'll keep doing what I'm doing at the moment. But as I didn't really know what that was, because I'd been sort of running, I suppose, looking after clients in my own business for a software development company. Now, that's fine if you've got a team of software developers, but I am not and never have been and never will be a software developer. But I thought I'd become an internet consultant. So it just wasn't a good idea. But I did have one good idea, which was I thought I'd build an email marketing engine. So I designed it, and I got a lovely man called Colin and his team to develop it. I invested a bit of money that I didn't have. And then we set up shop, and I set up a business called Now Email. Now Email was, God love me, ahead of its time. It was MailChimp with the sort of things that MailChimp have now, as opposed to the sort of things that MailChimp had in 2010. So it kind of knew what it was doing. And those are the days of Flash. I don't know if you remember Flash, Adobe Flash or Macromedia Flash.
It's not the theatre of the universe. No.
Not Flash. No, not the green Flash, but no, the other Flash, which was ubiquitous at the time. And everybody knew and loved Flash because it was all about vector graphics and all that kind of malarkey. And it was leading the digital charge on a Mac. Yeah, everything was. Yeah, it was groovy on a Mac. Everything was. Yeah, but I mean, everything was Flash because it was changing the way that people were building websites. And so we kind of. I thought, well, if that's what it's doing, I better make sure that this email marketing stuff actually communicates with it. so that if you clicked a link, then you could be tracked all the way through a Flash movie, which was genius. I'm a genius. And I developed all of that. Well, I didn't. I just told the guys what to do, and they did it rather marvelously. So it was all very good, but I had no idea about sales or marketing or any commercial thing at all, really. So I ended up doing campaigns for the likes of Unilever, and there's a rather massive magazine publishing organisation called Future Publishing. So I did some campaigns of people, Christmas campaign for a funny Welsh bloke who used to be on Kiddies TV, jumping up in a snow globe. And I wrote that. I think I wrote it. Oh, he rewrote it. I remember that. That was very embarrassing. So while he was acting, he decided to rewrite it. So, okay, fine, just do it. And I directed that and staged it and did all the technical stuff and all that kind of rubbish. And then, rather infamously, did a singing chef, because an agency rang me up and said, "We want a singing chef." I said, "You're welcome." So I went about finding and casting and writing a song, and then producing the email campaign and everything, just like the Wizard of Oz. Insane, really, completely insane. But it was great fun, and I think the client enjoyed it very much. And it all went swimmingly. But I was proving myself to be not particularly commercially minded, but the most inventive man on the planet, which doesn't really work in business if you think about it. Not really. But it was good. It was great experience. I mean, I think that's the point. It was very, very, very fine experience. And I learned a heck of a lot about digital production, which is effectively what I ended up doing. You know, I didn't really know that it was called digital production. And in a way, I kind of made it up as a job title. But that is what I was doing. And that's what I did, really, until very recently. Because I thought, and I suppose the purpose of this story, children, is to tell you that now what I'm doing is kind of a combination of all of the above, which is some training, I guess a little bit of education in a funny sort of way, based on what I know. And my knowledge is ridiculously broad-based, but I think appropriate now, if you can call it post-COVID, maybe almost who knows post-COVID, that period, that era, when a lot of people are unsure about the way they're communicating, particularly in the sort of space we're in at the moment, which is on a Zoom call. Sorry, I know I'm giving trade secrets away. I apologise. You can edit that out if you like. Okay. But the Zoom call what we're on, and there is a bit of an issue I'm aware of, and aware of it almost every day, which is that teams are not communicating quite right at the moment. It's like everybody's a bit ill, but no one's admitting it. And I was on a, I stowed away last week. Sorry, this is a pirate analogy again, on an employment law seminar. Largely as a bit of, kind of combo as a bit of research, but also to try and maybe become known to them as the sort of person who can help them out. And what was interesting about this webinar is that, first of all, it wasn't interesting. That was the first thing that was interesting about it, as in it was talking about employment law, but it wasn't the law. It wasn't the employment law. That's the point. It's employment law is not a dull subject at all. In fact, if you think about it, no subject is dull. It's the way it's conveyed that's dull. And it was dull. And this poor bloke who happened to be the managing partner said right at the beginning, "Congratulations, Jez. You are the only person with your video on." Because the rest of the audience had all switched their videos off, as if to say, if you think we're going to interact with the most boring webinar, which will patently be the most boring webinar because you've effectively telegraphed that, you must be joking. We're not showing up except as a C and a K and an L and an M, and little initials. They couldn't even be bothered, these people, to put their their little photograph up. So he just had a whole load of letters and me. And they must have had 30 people there, you know, and these guys did not know how to communicate. I mean, I felt for them because I just thought, if you're wondering why this isn't working, it isn't because it's boring. It's not boring. I mean, I have to say, the most oft heard phrase from accountants that I've met, particularly if they're corporate accountants, in other words, their job is within a large organization and they happen to be the accountant, is, here comes the boring stuff. I find that extraordinary. Why would you introduce your job or what you've been asked to do as, here comes the boring stuff? Even if you're trying to be funny, it ain't funny. It's quite sad. So I know this sounds like I'm campaigning on behalf of the dullest people on the earth, but it's not like that. They're not dull. They're the humans. They're brilliant. They're lovely. And they think that what they're about to do is going to be painful, which it isn't. It's dissemination of important information, but more importantly, if they bothered to get people to interact, it would actually be very interesting, because it's important it's important, you know, it's very important. So it's this kind of thing that I am majoring in these days, which is, you know, flying the flag for I guess, organizations who need to be able to communicate properly, not just, I mean, as it turns out, not just virtually, but generally, you know. And I think COVID has opened that very, very, very large can of worms, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's, I mean, you know, how many issues has it sort of, you know, unraveled? And we're only just starting. We're only at the tip of the iceberg. We just keep going there.
Yeah.
And that is just one of them, just one.
So, new name for your company then, the Unborinator.
The Unborinator. Here he comes. Oh, God, no.
Here comes the Unborinator. Turn her up.
Please come up with a tune.
Maybe not.
I love that. What a great idea.
Yes. Go and get the web domain now, quick. We can sell it to him for $1,000.
That's really good. The red webaphone. Well, no, we also got unboraphone.
Yeah.
I don't know. Unboraphone. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good, man. Sorry?
You wrote a book?
I wrote a book. Yeah, I did. Thank you for reminding me. I wrote a book, and it's called Peter True, The Early Years, and it's semi-autobiographical, because guess what? When I was a little boy, my mother sent me to a girls' school. Isn't that nice?
Mm-hmm.
And I've never got over it. Never got over it. But I thought it might be fun. Actually, it wasn't me that thought it might be fun. It was my partner. Here comes Hella again. And her idea, and this is about 10 years ago, I think, she said, that idea that you've just come up with about writing a screenplay about being at school in your teenage years in Oxford is rubbish. I went, no. And then she went, why don't you write about being at a girls' school? I went, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. So it went through various stages. First of all, screenplay, which of course I couldn't write. That's just silly, really. And then I just thought, right, I'll write a book then. Let's just write it and just keep writing it. And then I showed it to someone else, or not showed it to someone else. I told someone else about it who was in, because of course I want this to be on TV, obviously, because this is the way of me becoming on TV, but not coming on TV, as it were. So I spoke to a guy who happened to be in development in TV, and he said, oh, well, yeah, it's quite a good idea, but I want to know what happened to this guy. So I wrote effectively another book, but I thought it was the same part of the same book, which is about what happened to this guy, which was all very well, but it didn't quite work. And then about, I don't know, 2 years later, someone said to me, I quite like the sound of your voice, which I thought was very gratifying. And of course, I was exceptionally flattered. So, and then she went, why don't you do an audio book? And because I'd been so flattered, I just thought, yeah, all right, I'll do one of them then. And So what I did was I thought, right, I'm going to do an audiobook, not thinking that I was going to publish any kind of, paperback or hardback book or anything hard copy. I just thought I'm going to do an audiobook and I'm going to do it on Audible. So I set about doing that. So I recorded it all. And just as I was about to hit the golden button on the Amazon / Audible website, it said, it came up with a search bar that said, search for your book on Amazon. I thought, hold on. So I had all this. Lucky for me, I had a transcript, actually, because otherwise that would have been unfortunate. I mean, an organized transcript. I mean, obviously, I didn't recite everything from memory. I did have a transcript and it was organized. So in half a day only, I published a book on Amazon, which I was semi-proud of. But the bit that I was really proud of was actually getting the Audible book published, self-published, because no one in their right mind does that. It's the same thing as the Wizard of Oz I was telling you about earlier. So all that stuff with singing chefs and guys jumping out of snow globes actually came in quite handy, because that sort of mentality of, I'll do it, I don't care. I'm not going to pay someone to do that. That's just ridiculous, to pay someone to actually, a professional person, a person who knows what they're talking about. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give it a go. So I did. And I got through the vicious gatekeepers at Audible. I was just it weren't that vicious with me, actually. I was very surprised and slightly disappointed. and they were just, it was great. And I got through and I was, yay. I've sold about 3 copies, but it doesn't matter because as I told you, I'm not very good at marketing, but there is a place for this book. It is quite good for those people who've heard it. They say it's quite good. So I should really say that, shouldn't I, as I'm on your show? I'm supposed to be plugging something. But it is, apparently it's rather good. And people like its period quaintness because it is set in the early 70s. Which is a fantastic time for anything to be set in, frankly. So it's a time of great confusion, apart from anything else, culturally, if nothing else. Actually, it was a time of great confusion generally. I think a lot of people were generally confused. It's a great time to write something about. It's just really cool. So particularly if you're a boy at a girls' school, that's particularly confusing. So it's generally confusing and confused, but it's kind of pretty. And that was the intention. So I would heartily recommend it to your audience, or anyone else can think of it.
Yeah, we'll put the link in there.
So put a link in there wherever it happens to be.
Yeah.
But yes,
this goes on Audible as well, actually.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So we have them side by side.
Yeah. So you've run at least twice now.
Sponsored by Inspiration North. Find your North Pole or something. I don't know. I'll do a special. I'll do a special ad for you or something. A special voiceover ad for free.
No, it's brilliant. Cool. Is there anything we have forgot to talk about?
Oh, probably.
Okay.
I'm on TikTok.
Tell us about TikTok. This is always hilarious. So our audience would be absolutely delighted, Jez, to understand what you are doing.
Let me educate you, children. This is TikTok. TikTok is an extraordinary universe, as I've discovered over the last year. In April 2020, which is last year, just to remind you, my daughter's 19, and we decided it would be quite a good idea to do something because, stuck in the age of coronavirus, you're thinking, well, you're with your daughter, you think she's bored out of her mind. I'm kind of trying to keep her from not being bored out of her mind and wondering what to do next and that sort of thing. And we just sort of decided, let's go to the attic and make a video. Oh, I know, let's go on TikTok. What are we going to do then? And we both sort of came up with it at the same time because we were both aware of the fact that TikTok was mostly people doing crazy dances. At least that was the kind of public image of it. So we thought, well, I know. Why don't we get you, Theo, to teach me to dance? And as we all know, dads can't dance. So let's do a little bit of a comedy thing. So that's what we started to do. And the 5th video that went viral. And before we knew where we were, kind of, although I was obsessively counting, so it's probably a long time, it got up to 1.1 million views. and quite a lot of likes and quite a lot of comments, all because Theo said, the first thing she said in the video was, "You've got to throw it back." And I went, "What?" She said, "You've got to throw it back." Now, throw it back is a move, a dance move for the uninitiated. And for anyone under 20, it is a very well-known dance move, particularly on TikTok. And the idea of a man attempting to throw it back, apart from being slightly obscene, was also apparently quite hilarious. So that became our sort of clarion call, that one video. And then we kept going, and 650 videos later, actually it's probably more than that now, we're still going with something like 28,000 followers. We make sure we only follow friends of the show, officially friends of the show, because we have a live that we do 3 times a week. And it's become this thing where, I mean, quite humbling actually, because you kind of go and you realize that there are, first of all, because we are in the, loving the time of coronavirus, we are in that period. And so a lot of kids, particularly because most people we talk to are under 17, and most of them are girls, because girls like TikTok, and they particularly like stupid dads with their lovely daughters. They love that. And particularly if they talk to them, because we actually talk to them. And because it's weird, isn't it? If you're on a live, you've probably experienced this. It's all a bit weird, which is, well, I know you've experienced it. It's weird because you've got chat going on, but text, and you've got to converse with it, if you can be bothered, of course. But we can, and it's kind of slightly odd and surreal. But they say really nice things like, "Oh, this is what I look forward to every whatever." And I think, well, that's kind of sad, but it's also rather beautiful. So, and some of them are actually not very well. I mean, they're kind of upset with life. Some of these kids. So, we're kind of almost agony aunt and great uncle, and it's quite touching. I mean, it's really become that. Having started by just mucking about, we're now sort of, and then we're thinking, right, we better do a YouTube channel then, haven't we? Because if this is happening, we better graduate to adults. So we're going to be doing I can't remember what happened with, this is before, I'm sure this is before your time, but anyway, Tiz was, which was a famous show of the 1970s, graduated to an adult show that didn't quite work. But that's what we're sort of trying to do with our mucking about. So it's Jez and Theo. Very simple. If you want to find it on TikTok, excuse me, Jez and Theo. And it's me mucking about and Theo trying to stop me from being an idiot, which he will never do.
Yeah.
I will always be her idiotic dad.
So I'm wondering, when we go and visit my dad in Kent in the summer, if we're allowed out by then, or we have to go back in or whatever,
He'll be all right. He'll be fine.
I'll get Oliver to teach us to do some, what's that awful game he plays? Oh, Fortnite moves. And my dad can get involved.
Fortnite moves is good. Do that, definitely. Yeah. It's good. It'll be viral within 5 minutes.
I won't really, don't panic.
So there you go. So that's good. So yes, so that's occurring. That's something else to plug.
Cool.
And marvellous. That's 2 things I've plugged already.
Out. And we're going to
how wonderful is that? Well. Flipping brilliant. And yeah, I probably plugged my business as well. So that's 3. That's like the golden triumvirate.
Yeah, the holy trinity of business plugging.
How wonderful is that?
Awesome. So I think we might lower the tone even more now.
Please.
And go through to the quick fire rounds. So
yes.
So question number 1.
Mm-hmm.
What job would you be terrible at?
Just arbitrary, anything really. What job would I be terrible at? Something that was essentially high-powered admin. So I'd be a really bad chief financial officer.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually the job to get. If you want to bring down a company, put me in as CFO.
Right, I've got some interesting targets for you then.
Definitely. With pleasure. Bring them down.
Okay. Question number 2. What have you really wanted to do for a long time but haven't done yet? You can
Well, there's something that I want to happen that hasn't happened, but I don't think that falls into this category. I think you're asking me something that I actually want to do, aren't you? As opposed to something I want to happen.
Well, that's the same. You can be a bit pirate with it.
Yeah, whatever. I want that book to be turned into a TV series.
Okay.
And I'm quite serious about it, which is weird, isn't it? But I am. I want it to be turned into a TV series. I even know the person who should be, or I knew the person who should be responsible for turning into one. So that's a bit scary as well. And I think, if you're getting at, which I think you might be, the thing that's holding me back, loads of things are holding me back with that. I mean, so many things. So it's very interesting because it's a brilliant question to ask me. I think that's the one. I think that is the one thing. Definitely, I'm sort of determined, but there's something stopping me from actually getting it to happen. So yeah. I'll
journal on that. Your homework.
I will hire you. I'm sorry, that'd be my homework.
Yeah. So do some journaling. What the fear is.
Yes, I will. I will include it in because I'm doing this thing called the Miracle Morning, which you may know about.
Yes.
Which I sort of stuck at since the beginning of the year, so I'm a bit amazed about that. I include I've tweaked it a bit because I do that sort of thing. So the very final thing I do in the kind of hour that I've got is affirmations, which you probably know. You know about affirmations as opposed to affirmations. Affirmations is when you take an affirmation and instead of doing I am the greatest rock star since history mankind or whatever you want to say, you say why am I the greatest rock star and then answer it. And it's brilliant. It's a really good exercise. So I kind of write down the questions and then just write like crazy. So I would put why am I the greatest script writer or something like that, or why is Peter True a great success on TV. Something like that. So I'll make that an affirmation, especially for you, but actually for me, if I'm honest.
Let me know how you get on.
Yeah, definitely.
And then question number 3.
Yes.
What rules do you make for yourself?
I do Miracle Morning. I don't. I sometimes break that rule, obviously, because that's what they're there for breaking. But I actually like that rule very much. So I tend to adhere to it for the most part. We have some family rules which we stick to, which revolve around food and taking the trash out. I'm not very good at taking the trash out. I'm better at doing the floors, but we're all very good at doing our spot of food. So we have a food rota. There are 3 of us, and we all cook, I have to say, fairly ambitious food, considering the time we have allocated for ourselves.
You're allowed in the kitchen between this hour and this hour.
Ready.
Precisely.
Yes.
As you can tell, we're slightly rule conscious. No. I mean, we're not actually. We're trying our best to have some sort of rules. But yes, we have some. We have those sort of rules. I probably have other rules as well, but they're probably very dull.
Yes. Cool. So the last question we ask everybody: if we could get into the DeLorean and take you back to your 18-year-old self without obviously damaging time and you disappearing, what advice would you give you?
What I would do is I would say, this is your daughter. Be more like her.
Mic drop. Awesome.
Thank you.
Like the shortest one, yes.
Well, yeah, I think it probably would be, actually. It was very short. Sorry about that.
Your 18-year-old self would be like, what was that all about?
Who was that weirdo?
Who was he?
Yeah. What did that actually mean? What did he mean?
It's like,
what are you talking about?
Okay. It's like no advice at all.
Are we going to think about that? Oh, no, we won't. No, we'll just leave it there.
So I am still as random when I'm a bit older. Oh, dear me.
So in terms of if you would like to follow Jez, for our listeners, we've already mentioned it, look for Peter True, The Early Years on Audible and Amazon, or go to mytruetalent.co.uk.
We'll find him on TikTok.
Or TikTok or in Clubhouse.
Yeah. Or Instagram.
Yeah,
or
everywhere.
LinkedIn.
I'm everywhere. Ubiquitous as heck. You have been warned. You have now met Jez, and that's it now.
Awesome. Well, thank you ever so much. I have properly loved chatting with you, and my cheeks are hurting from giggling.
Likewise. Thank you very much, both of you. It's been a total flipping awesome pleasure.
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway and tell everybody.